Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Brilliantly Resilient Live. I am Mary Fran Bontempo. I'm here with my buddy, Christian Smedley, and we have a wonderful guest today, my friend, Pat Nogar, who I met, gosh, when did we meet? Like
Oh,
four,
5,
5
6
years?
years ago. Yeah.
It was a while back, and you were starting a new endeavor, which we're going to talk about today.
Yes.
And Pat, the reason I love Pat is she bakes and makes these incredibly amazing confections that are just they're gorgeous to look at, let alone taste. And you also do a show called Living Well with Pat Nogar, which we really need that now. We need to think about a time beyond all of this fear and challenge and all of that
Indeed, we
when
do.
we can get back to happy stuff. So welcome, Pat, and tell us a little bit about you and your journey.
My journey is a very long one, and with lots of stations along the way. But I'm a relatively new person to the Philadelphia area, and I say relatively because, in Philadelphia, if you weren't born and raised here, you're still sort of an outsider.
That's right, you are.
But I'm a product of the Midwest and the South. And we moved to Philadelphia, which is my husband's home. We moved here, I guess it's been about maybe 21, 22 years ago, with sort of an interim stop in Baltimore, where we left St. Louis, which is where I met my husband. He had come there to work. And we met and we decided to marry, after dating, of course. We didn't just meet and decide to marry, but we met.
Hey, that's
I'm
a
glad you
reality
put some
show
thought
now.
into it.
That is a
Really,
reality show.
He looked at me and said, I guess let's get married. But we then, he was offered a job in Baltimore, so we moved to Baltimore. We were there for several years and then moved to Philadelphia. And that really is kind of, I guess, the arc of my story that Mary Fran was and I had were talking about just right before we went on. Because when we left St. Louis, I was just filled with optimism. I thought, this is great. I love new beginnings. I love new starts. It gives you a chance to kind of refresh yourself and try things that you may not have thought about before. So I pulled up stakes, quit my job, and off we went to Baltimore, where he would be working. And the first thing, of course, was that I couldn't find a job. But that was another whole story. But, while we were there, lots of things just began to change. One was, I think, that whole transition from living in the Midwest and the South to moving to the East Coast.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah. It's
I
a
did
whole
the
other
reverse
world
move.
over here.
I did the
It's
reverse. I
culture
went from
shock.
the East Coast to the Midwest. I thought I would die of boredom.
Oh, exactly. Yep, you're not used to the slow pace of the Midwest. It would kill you, and I
It's
can
nice out there,
understand that.
But yeah,
So
that's
imagine
a
that in
move.
reverse.
Yeah.
Moving to the to the great Northeast, and but I began to settle in, and then a lot of things just began to happen, just one after another. It was like dominoes falling. The first thing was losing a sibling, and actually, losing a sibling, and actually lost two of them, and two of my four siblings, and then I lost my job. It was in between the sibling loss and my job loss, I was diagnosed with lupus.
Gosh.
So,
oh my gosh.
So I was struggling with losing my siblings. I'm struggling with being diagnosed with lupus. And I don't know what you know about lupus, but there are certain things that just happen with lupus. I always tease my doctor. I said, if I had to have a disease, why would I have one that was so inconvenient? Because it literally lays you to the ground.
Yeah.
The fatigue is overwhelming. The joint pain can be overwhelming. And the one thing that happens to you is what no woman wants to happen is you can lose your hair. It was, so there were all of these things going on while I was trying to adjust to all the other changes in my life. And then of course, a job loss. At that time, I had landed a great job for several years as vice president of a hospital in Baltimore, and just was having the time of my life. And then, of course, the hospital was sold to a larger international hospital corporation. And, of course, they said the usual things. Nobody's going to lose their job. We love all of you. It's going to be great. Well, of course, we all lost our jobs ultimately. So there I was now balancing all these other things and now facing job loss. And in the midst of that, my husband had been offered a job in Philadelphia.
Hey.
So I thought, okay, maybe we can reset here. And so off we come to Philadelphia. And after moving to Philadelphia, I quickly got the news. Then, of course, I didn't have a job, but I also quickly got the news that my mother and my sister, within 30 days of each other, had been diagnosed with terminal cancer.
Gosh.
Oh my
And
gosh, Pat.
so, yeah. And so here I was on the East Coast. And one of the reasons we chose the neighborhood that we chose when we moved to Philadelphia was that we would be near my husband's parents who were aging, and we could take care of them. Well, as it turned out, it was my family that needed the care. So here I was flying back and forth, doctor's appointments for myself and flying back and forth and looking for a job. So, trying to figure out where my new normal was absolutely impossible because nothing was normal.
Yeah.
There was one point when I just literally sat down and said to myself, you know the movie Jaws?
Yeah.
One of the reasons I love movies is that I always remember the lines from those movies. There are certain lines that you just always remember. And one of the movies was when the shark first appeared and Roy Scheider said, "We're going to need a bigger boat."
We're going to need a bigger boat. I knew you were going to say that one.
Exactly. So throughout all that, all I could think of was, I just don't have enough. I need a bigger boat to get through this. These waters are just overwhelming. So that kind of became my mantra is, how do I build a bigger boat to survive this? Well, of course, over time, my mother and my sister did pass away. And they passed away within 2 weeks of each other. So by that time, I actually, believe it or not, in the middle of all this, had found a job here in Philadelphia. And one of the things that, added a great plank to my boat, as I always say, in retrospect, you look at what the planks were that kept you afloat. I had a boss, Ed, and I went to him and said, this is what's going on. And I really need to go back home to St. Louis to take care and to help and to be there for my family. And he looked at me and said, "You go to St. Louis to take care of your family. I'll take care of your pay on this end.
No way.
I don't want you to even think about it." And I pulled up stakes, packed a bag, and left my husband and everybody behind and went to St. Louis to take care of my mother and my sister, and never once missed a paycheck.
Wow.
Oh, God bless him.
And,
Wow.
when you have, when people sort of come alongside you like that, and do those things, those are the things that we have to look around and find.
Yeah.
We sometimes lose sight of those things, and they come from the most unexpected places. Who would have thought that one of my strongest planks at the time would come from a boss,
right?
On a job? And but he just literally, and they never even called to say, "How's it going? When are you coming back?" It was just, "Let us know when you're headed back this way." So I came back, after we buried my mother and my sister, and I spent some time putting their affairs in order. I came back, and within a short period of time, I got the phone call that my last remaining sibling was ill. And so off I went again to help take care of him. And I was flying back and forth, and we thought we had everything resolved. And he had surgery, which we thought had fixed the major problem that he was having. And within 2 days of surgery, he passed away. So, and I had just been there. So I was back on an airplane out there to help bury him. So it was, it was one of those compressed periods in my life, or when I look back on it now, I say, how did I survive that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, but I think, my mother always had a saying, and I've thought about it a lot as we've gone through this pandemic and gone through all the grief and the challenges and the things that people are facing. And she always said to me, with adversity always comes opportunity.
Oh, I like that.
And when you're in the middle of it, you think, how could there possibly be an opportunity in all of this? But, there is. And one of the opportunities is finding out just really how strong you are. It's an opportunity to get to know yourself better, because it forces you to go inward and find your reserve and your resolve, because the alternative is to be angry. The alternative is to lose sight of everything that's around you. And that's the place you just don't want to go to. The place you want to go to is inside of yourself. And what you find is there are just amazing reserves in there. The second opportunity that's there is the opportunity to look around and see what that new family looks like. And I have found friends and neighbors who sort of came along beside me throughout this whole process and became my family.
Yeah.
So, you know, you can re-knit yourself, I guess, for lack of a better word. And you can, and that boat that you end up with sometimes is so much stronger than the boat you had originally. You know, because life was happy. We had a family that was very closely knit. We spent holidays together. We had plans that we would all retire together. We were going to start a business together. You know, we were doing all kinds of things. And all of a sudden, I had to reset and recharge because everything was gone. You know, everything that I had looked forward to and what my life would look like had totally changed. There's a word that I see used a lot, and I use it when I look at my friends who own restaurants right now in the midst of this pandemic, because they're all scrambling, trying to stay afloat. And that word is pivot.
Mary Fran loves that word.
Pivot.
It is such an important word right now, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Because if you don't pivot, you don't make it.
Yeah, that's true.
You really don't make it. And we like to think, oh my gosh, you know, I wanted to do this and I had planned to do that. And I had this on my agenda. And I've gotten, believe me, the messages I had gotten from people are absolutely amazing about their businesses, you know, and many people are angry. You know, many people are grieving. I had planned to do this and now it's all gone. And my kid can't go to their prom, or my kid, you know, and all of those are legitimate reasons to grieve and to be angry. But here's the reality. It is what it is.
Yep.
This is what we've been given. This is what we've been given. And so what do we make of it? We pivot and we look ahead to see what now can we do.
Yeah, you can't change it. It's here. Everything
It
is
is
shut
here.
down. You can't change it. Don't we get stuck there? That we were talking to Ming Shelby yesterday about the courage and having the courage to pivot and the courage to get out there, because it is, we do get stuck. And I mean, God, you just look at my Twitter feed in the morning, the anger, people stuck in that anger where we're at.
They're stuck, you know, and think of as a society what our opportunities are. We forget about the Spanish flu. Remember when that pandemic hit? I mean, none of us were alive, obviously, and our society in many ways has forgotten that.
Yeah.
1918 came and millions of people died across the world from the Spanish flu. What happened after the 1918 pandemic? The Roaring 20s.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
So we forget that one of the worst pandemics this country and this world has ever experienced happened right before that. You know, so what are we going to do now? Where are we going? What are our opportunities? What are we going to make out of this? How are we going to bond together and create a new network, you know, a new fabric? You know, I love that phrase, making things out of whole cloth.
Oh, yeah.
You know, because it really, you know what that speaks to? It speaks to strength.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's kind of like the building the boat analogy, making things strong. So we can look and say, what are we going to create out of whole cloth? You know, we can do this. We can find new things. You know, 5 years ago, I got the phone call that no parent ever wants to get. And that was a phone call that my only child had passed away.
Oh, gosh.
And, you know, I can remember and still remember, because it's like it was yesterday, thinking, okay, I've lost both my parents. I've lost all my siblings. And now I've lost my only child. How do you bounce back from that? And it has been a long road, I will tell you. It has not been an easy road. But here is the saving grace, is that every morning my eyes open.
Yeah.
Every morning I get a new gift.
Well,
And
your spirit is, I honestly, I'm sitting here listening to you talking about loss after loss after loss. And honestly, it's a testament to your spirit and I'm sure your faith that you were able to pull anything together after all of that, let alone, I mean, honestly, Pat, when you and I first met, I was just struck by your optimism and by your genuine, kind, compassionate spirit. And if anybody has a right to be angry, it's you.
Well, for everything that has happened in my life, and I could point to you so many people that have had worse, even though it may not sound like it. Seriously, I try to remember that for every bad thing that's happened, worse things have happened. But within my own life, for every bad thing that's happened, I can point to you 5, 10 good things that have happened. People that I have met who have come alongside and shared with me, or people who've just talked to me, and you walk away saying, that changed my day.
Yeah.
But here's the key. You have to be open to them, and you have to look for them.
Yeah.
People talk about God talking to them. You ever heard people say that? God talk. You hear the prophets say that all the time. People say, "Oh, God talks to me." He really doesn't talk to me. But except there are a couple occasions where I literally felt like I heard the voice of God. And one of them was many years ago when I was living in Washington, D.C. And I had lost my favorite cousin, had been diagnosed with cancer. And I only have 2 first cousins in my life, and she was one of them. And I was laying in the bed crying. I literally was crying because she and I were very close. And I said to God, you know how you cry out because you say, I don't know where else to go?
Yeah.
Why are you taking everything away from me? And this is the first time I've ever said this publicly, other than to my husband. But I said to God, why are you taking everything away from me? And it was an answer that came as surely as if I had heard the voice of God. And I think it was in my head. I'm not sure. But the answer was, I'm taking away from you so that I can add unto you.
Wow.
Wow.
And I sort of sat back. I literally stopped crying because I thought, what was that? And what did that mean? I've spent all these years really trying to understand what that meant, what that message meant. But what it did say to me, I finally decided that it said that with every loss comes a gain.
You are speaking to my entire heart and soul, because I'll tell you why. You're saying it's taking you a while to figure it out. I am 20 years into raising blind children, and I had,
Wow.
I don't have conversations with God. I have full on tantrums and like boxing gloves.
I know that feeling.
He is so beat up by me. He's like, here she comes. Jesus, Mary, Joseph, take her. I can't take it.
That's right. Batten down the hatches. She's
I was
here again.
so mad. And in my big faith speech in my moment of surrender, I said, why would you make a kid blind? Like, that's mean. And you are a mean God. What is your deal? But I will say this, it's taken me 20 years. And because my son is 20, and I just realized, blindness I don't consider a curse or a blessing or nothing. Right. But I will say all my dreams for my kids were gone. That's what it took away, was my dreams. And it was the greatest thing that ever happened, because my kids have grown up with their own.
That's right. Their own dreams.
Their own dreams.
Exactly right.
And people say, why are they so happy and accomplished? And they're not scared to take on anything. I said, because they're not living under the weight of what I want for them.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
A long time ago. So he filled our lives with this. Every now and again, I'm like, okay, we got it. I can't take everything that these do.
Like these unexpected gifts that when we formulate our idea of what our lives should be. Mm-hmm. It's that what's everybody attributes it to John Lennon, but I don't think he was the first one to say it. It's life is what happens to you when you're making other plans. But it's and it's so true. We formulate plans, and then, God comes along, or whoever you believe in comes along, fate or whatever it is, and just knocks the hell out of those plans,
Yeah.
But what comes out of that often is something that is so amazing and something that you may never have thought of, whether it's something that happens to you or whether it's something you're giving to others, because we really are all interconnected. We really are. I mean, haven't you had people come into your life and you think, if I had not met that person, I would not be on this path right now?
Yes, for sure.
So, we get so stuck in where we want to go. Sometimes we need to get knocked off that path.
I guess we get blasted off. I got tractors coming at me. He throws everything to knock me off paths. I'm like,
that's exactly right.
Walk through life,
and not that I think that all the people in my life who had passed away had had to pass away for me to learn lessons. That's not what I mean.
Yeah.
What it means is that when those things happen, we have to look for the good. We have to learn the lessons. They are here to teach us things. And, you know, if we don't learn them, woe be unto us, really. We've not done our job. So in this pandemic, one of the things I said Saturday morning when I was doing my Facebook Live was, I know everybody is grieving. Grieve and get over it.
Yes.
You know,
That sounds like a Mary
That-
Franism.
That's my thing. You know, are you just visiting this yuck, or are you going to live there? You make that decision.
That's
You know,
exactly
you make that decision.
right.
And that, we talk about that all the time, because that is the thing. You talk about pivoting, that pivots your whole mindset. It pivots your course of action. It pivots everything. When you make that decision that whatever you're experiencing, as awful as it is, that you're just visiting, I am not going to live there. It's not going to define the rest of my life. Then automatically your brain on some subconscious level, even if you don't know where you're going with that.
That's exactly right.
It starts to move you in that direction. So I want to talk about now the things that you have created, because you have created some amazing platforms and things right aligned with that whole sense of everybody being interconnected and you wanting to live that out. So tell me about all your stuff. You and I first met when you were starting the Sophia Group.
Well, the Sophia Group is an interesting group, as you know. And I've struggled to find the right name for the Sophia Group. It really is targeted at mature women. And, you know, don't you hate that phrase, mature women? It kind of sounds like we're done. You know, it's like an overripe banana. You know, it's like you sit there on the counter, turn and shrivel up, you know, and just done. So I hate that phrase. And I finally came up with women in their prime. That's who we are.
There you go.
And the reason I started the Sophia Group was because I was going to lots of networking events, lots of them. And I loved the women I was meeting. They were young, they were vibrant, they were filled with, you know, hope and optimism and energy, but they weren't living my life.
Yeah.
You know, they hadn't reached the point where they really were living the things that I was living. They didn't have the challenges that I had. They didn't have the experiences that I had in my life. And I found I needed to be talking to women who I didn't have to explain what a song was. You know, it's like my favorite song was, you know, Marvin Gaye. And I'm like, oh, who's Marvin Gaye? You know, I didn't want to go there. And so I formed this group 5 years ago called the Sophia Group. And it's these women are just unbelievable. You know, they're women who are going through various transitions in their lives, whether it's job changes, whether it's retirement, whether it's widowhood, you know, divorces, remarriages, starting new businesses. And they're all facing the same challenges. How do I reinvent myself? How do I pivot? You know, and how do I do it successfully? So that's what we do. We try to provide a platform for women to share ideas and, you know, and to come together and to sort of bounce, you know, so that we don't get relegated to the heap of mature women. You know, we have so much to offer still. You know, I say to younger women who sometimes can be a little impatient because they think we've had our time. And I always say to them, I'm not ready to leave the stage yet. I will leave when I'm ready. You know, don't push me, you know, so because
don't push me, girl.
Don't push me. That's exactly right. Do not, because you will not want to see that. But, you know,
I always say, look, I'm 60 years old. If you're going to knock me down, you better kill me, because if I get up, it's going to be ugly.
That's right. If I get up,
I got nothing to lose.
It's on. That's exactly right.
Mary Fran is the charming on the show.
Well, you know, and what has happened, I remember as I was growing up, women, I always looked to women who were older than me with reverence. You know, there was just a sense of awe about them. You know, they just handled themselves. They carried themselves in a different way. That time is sort of over. You know, things have kind of been compressed, and younger women don't really look at older women in the same way, because I think it's because they're used to living in a world that changes a lot faster than the world that I lived in, that I grew up in. So they think, okay, your time is over, move on to my time. You know, and so, you know, they really need to be reminded that we have a body of information and a body of experience and a body of wisdom that would really benefit them. And so I love the fact that there are women coming into Sophia who are sort of under that prime age, because they're enjoying hearing what we're talking about. And we love hearing what they have to say. Plus, they know technology a lot better than can help us out. You know?
Well, you know, it's interesting, Pat, that that you say that, because I think what ends up happening is the reverence that people used to have for an older generation came out of a recognition that they had been through challenges and gone
Yes.
through them. The younger generation doesn't really see that yet, but it's when they get hit with things that
That's right.
suddenly they go, I don't know what to do about this. And that's
exactly
when the
right.
shift is, where they look to the older generation and go, oh my God, like any young person hearing your story right now would be like, oh my God, I couldn't survive that. And yet you have. And that's where they end up gravitating towards people who've had life experiences that they're going to need help getting through.
And I hope so, because we can help them build that bigger boat for themselves.
Yes.
You know,
That's the beauty of telling your story, because then when all the generations hear it, then that's why we wanted to start talking to a lot of the younger crowds. So they have these tools of
right.
their boat going into life, that a lot of us didn't have. We were just building it as we went.
That's exactly right. Truly we were building it as we went.
Yeah.
But I look at how people are responding to the pandemic. Younger people are having a lot more trouble with being quarantined, with sheltering in place, because they're used to just sort of going whenever they want to go. And that's great. That's kind of American, isn't it? We have the freedom to come and go as we want, and nobody can tell us what to do. Those of us who've lived through things that we don't want to live through, but understand that we sometimes have to live through those things, we get it.
Yes.
You know, we can hunker down and look around and make the best of what this is, and come out of it with something new. And that's the lesson that we can teach them, I think.
You're right. You're right. Okay, so we've only got a few minutes left, but I want to talk about your Living Well program, because really and truly that is an oasis in this.
I'm glad to hear that.
In this time that we're in, because it's funny. This is going to sound so bizarre.
From you
last night. Yeah, well, it will. Even for me, this is bizarre.
Okay.
So last night before I went to bed, I took out of my jewelry box my sparkliest pair of earrings and put them on in the bathroom and just looked at them.
I love it.
I was like, I need to see pretty right now. I
That's
need
right.
to see something that reminds me of
That's right.
of like just unfiltered joy. And they were the earrings that I wore to my daughter's weddings too. So that was that was the other thing. But your show is my sparkly earrings.
I love that. You know, one of the things that I try to do through the show, and as you know, I've had a long career, whether I've worked in urban planning, I've worked in public transportation, all of it's been communications aspect of it, through healthcare. I've worked across a number of industries, and have had a really, I'm very grateful for the career I've had. I've owned my own PR firm. I mean, I'm really very grateful for the life that I've had. But the one I've kind of settled on is the one that has been a thread throughout my entire life, mostly because of my mother and my aunts and those people who knew how to live well. And that's kind of what Living Well grew out of. It's about understanding that we all can live, and we really owe it to ourselves to live an elevated life. When we talk about manners and we talk about etiquette, people want to laugh at that. Younger people say, I don't have time for that. But what they don't get is that is the oil that greases the wheels of civilized society.
Yes. Yes.
Understanding how to treat each other, understanding how to treat each other well, understanding even how to sit at the table with each other and dine properly is what moves things along. So I guess my newest mission in life is really translating and communicating that information. And on Saturday mornings, which is presented by Living Well with Pat Nogar, Saturday mornings with Pat is my time to sit at my table and share with people. And to share with them ideas for culture, for cuisines, for just how do you make your life better? We've just become a society where we throw on sweatpants and we throw a comb through our hair and out the door we go. And we forget that we really are just a step below angels. And that means that we really owe it to ourselves to do better. And when we do better, we live better. So that's really where I am right now. I've tried to work with young professionals to show them how they can elevate their own careers by living well. Many people don't really get that they didn't land a large account because they dined with their potential client and they had horrendous table manners.
Yeah, they ate
And the
chicken.
client, yeah, and the client is
It's
thinking,
true.
I'm not going to let you meet anybody that I know. You know, you're shoving bread in your mouth, you're eating with the wrong fork, you know. So, you know, and I've seen those things happen, and it kind of really pushed me to say, this wisdom needs to be passed on. So I sort of spend my life doing that. And Saturday mornings is kind of my time to take a breath, sit at the table, and invite everybody to my table.
I love that
share
Saturday morning thing. I gotta ask you about your Saturday morning show. Did you
Right.
you do this on purpose, that the camera is across the table? You feel like you're sitting at the table with you. Is that on purpose? Or did this end
No,
up-
it wasn't on purpose at first. It was because I didn't know where else to put it. And
You're a
then
production
people said,
genius.
and people then start saying to me, I feel like I'm sitting at your table.
Yeah,
So now
you see the table and you across it, and you feel like you're sitting right with you.
exactly. So now we spend a lot of time making sure that camera is just like it should be, so that people, and it really is, you know, I was raised by, let me say this, I was raised by a woman who really made the template. She was Martha before anybody ever thought there could be a Martha. You know, if anybody could have made lifestyle and industry, it would have been Edwina. That's my mother. I was raised in her kitchen. You know, I was raised chopping and, you know, and setting the table, and she was in her hostess gown greeting guests while I was in the back, you know, chopping. And so, you know, much of what I learned was from watching her and her friends.
Yep.
And how they lived. Now think about this. This is, in my growing up years, this was a Black woman who lived life in such a beautiful way. Can you imagine what that challenge was?
Yeah, right.
You know, to just carve out that time to find beauty and to live life well. And many Black women did that. You know, they just kind of get glossed over in history, but many of them did. And they created people like me. So, you know, it's so I really try to pass that information and that I guess really that culture along, that it's possible. And not only is it possible, it's important to do.
Yeah.
So that's
Well,
kind of my newest mission in life.
We are blessed that you have been able to do that, and that we're close enough to get this directly from you. And so now, before we sign off, tell people where they can find you so that they can take advantage of all of this.
They can find me in two ways on Facebook under Pat Nogar, which is where as you know, the Facebook Live emanates from. And then I share it over on the other platform, which is Living Well with Pat Nogar. So if anybody will send me a friend request to Pat Nogar, I will do that. That way you'll get the notices that I go live on Saturday mornings. Follow me also on Living Well with Pat Nogar, and follow me on Instagram under Living Well with Pat Nogar. And that's where I post a lot of pictures and a lot of you know, information about what I'm doing. So I invite everybody to come along and join the party.
Well, you have given us a party today, and it was just amazing and uplifting on pretty much every level. I could literally just sit here. I feel like, you know, you're the preacher and I'm just sitting here taking it all in. So
well, thank you for inviting me.
Somebody in our Facebook comments said they want to sit and have dinner with you, Pat.
I would love that. You know, when this is all over, you know, one of the I know we're ending, but there are a couple of things I did over the last year that were great. I did Saturday mornings with Pat out in the community at a local at Sugar Bridge Kitchen and Design Center, where I invited people to come and shared with them all kinds of information and people who were doing really fabulous things in the culinary community. So there will be other opportunities once we're all sprung from jail.
Oh,
I'm gonna go as soon as we're sprung.
I want an invite.
I'll even sit next to Mary Fran and I won't fight with her.
There you go. So we will all be dining together soon.
Yes.
Yay! Well, I can't thank you enough, Pat, for being with us today. This was an excellent way to end the weekend, to launch us all into Easter weekend, where hopefully people will be, and Passover, where people will be celebrating with families, even though we're at a distance. So
exactly.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of Brilliantly Resilient.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Pat.
And we will see everybody tomorrow. Because we're doing this every day. So we'll see you tomorrow.
I'll be watching.
Bye.